Hello, COM302 and YouTube. My name is Dr. Christopher Brooke, and today I will be answering questions about touch in romantic relationships. I recently gave a presentation on the importance of touch in romantic relationships, and now I'll be answering the questions that were submitted by the audience. Now, before we begin, you should know that I'm not actually a doctor, not in any way, shape, or form. I'm currently an undergrad enrolled in Communications 302, and my knowledge on this topic consists of a handful of articles I've read on the subject, plus my own observations and analysis. So you should not consider me to be an authority on any of what's going to be covered in these videos. If you are looking for real advice or knowledge on any of the subjects that I will be talking about here, you should find an actual doctor or other professional who is trained and licensed to provide counsel on the subject, because as I will say yet again, I am not really a doctor and you should not take anything I say as an authoritative view on the subject. The presentation that preceded these videos was an in-class presentation I gave on a research assignment, and the questions I will be answering were submitted by other students in my class. Answering these questions via video is part of the assignment. Now, all that being said, I'm in a suit, I'm sitting in front of a bookcase, and I'm going to call myself Dr. Brooke right now, simply because it's more fun to do the assignment this way. Lastly, please forgive me if these responses sound a little bit scripted. I did write out my answers in order to make sure that I don't miss anybody or anything I want to talk about. Firstly, I want to lay just a bit of background for anybody who cares to watch this who wasn't in my class this semester and so didn't see my presentation. The main topic of my paper and presentation was that there are three basic types of touch that occur in a romantic relationship. Firstly, there is bonding touch, which I will also refer to as emotional touch, and which generally includes gestures such as holding hands, hugging, putting an arm around a partner, and similar manners of touching. This type of touch is generally meant to create emotional and physical connection and intimacy between the partners. The second category of touch I talked about is caregiving touch, which includes such gestures as holding someone tight or hugging them if they're afraid or upset, placing a hand on someone's shoulder to comfort them, giving a massage or a back rub, and other gestures or touches of this sort. This type of touch is generally meant to comfort or help the person, and it builds emotional connection between romantic partners by signaling that the partners are willing to comfort and care for each other. And then the third type of touch is sexual touch, which encompasses passionate kissing, dirty dancing, and a whole range of other behaviors we're not going to get into here. Sexual interaction at some level is ultimately the goal of most romantic relationships, and most couples move progressively towards sexual touch as trust and comfort levels are established on both physical and emotional levels. And that's pretty much the gist of what I talked about in my presentation. And then the rest of what I'm going to be covering here are questions that were submitted during and after the presentation that I gave. So, first question, where did you find these three types of touches? Originally, I found these descriptions in an article titled "Adult Romantic Attachment and Individual Differences in Attitudes Towards Physical Contact in the Context of Adult Romantic Relationships," written by Kelly A. Brennan of the State University of New York State at Stony Brook. And then several of the other articles that I read use similar descriptions. I just kind of like the name on these best. Um, Next, what is the most common touch for caring? I was actually not able to find a definitive answer for this question, but I will elaborate a little bit on caregiving touch. A caregiving touch does not have to be as elaborate as a massage or a bear hug. The main purpose of a caregiving touch is to show the person, I am here for you, I support you. Think about putting your hand on a friend's shoulder or squeezing a significant other's hand when they're having a bad day. It doesn't have to be anything extensive. Usually it's just a simple touch to let them know that you're there for them and you're willing to kind of help them feel better or get past whatever it is that they're currently stuck on. Next question here, what would be an example of an indirect touch? As I used it in my presentation, an indirect touch would be the touch you receive while touching somebody else. If you reach out and touch someone on the shoulder, we think of you as touching their shoulder, but in reality, their shoulder is also touching your hand. This would be an example of indirect touch. Do you think emotional or physical touch is used more nowadays? And firstly, I'm interpreting this question as, is emotional or sexual touch used more nowadays? Forgive me if that's not exactly the question that was answered here, but based on what was written, that's how I'm going to interpret it. And I hope this is what you want to know. Overall, emotional or bonding touch is more prevalent in our daily lives than sexual touch, simply because of the wide range of situations we use it in. I think that sexual touch is far more common now and in the past several decades than it has been prior to that, especially when you look at sexual touch between people who aren't specifically a couple. But emotional touch is still used far more than sexual touch. We use emotional touch all the time and with far more people than we're usually willing to use sexual touch with. Also, as I'm going to talk about later, for most sexual touch, even at a nightclub or in some other situation where passionate touch is often initiated very quickly, there will pretty much always be some level of bonding touch required before more intimate touch is allowed. And most sexual touch will usually also be accompanied by bonding or caregiving touch, especially if your partner is somebody you care about and somebody you've been with for a length of time. Next question. What problems arise in communicating through touch? The main issue is generally miscommunication. Touch can express a wide range of information, including some very specific information, but touch is oftentimes very vague and dependent on context and interpretation. If people aren't on the same page, they can drastically misinterpret a touch. And since touch is such a personal means of communicating, misinterpreted touch can come off as offensive, creepy, or even hostile. How should you confront somebody who touches a lot during a conversation? I did a bit of research on this and read through several forums where people asked the same question. The main problem I generally saw people had was finding a way to get the message across that didn't make them seem like a jerk. From what I read, two of the solutions that worked well were to maintain space from the person. For example, inadvertently taking a step back from them as they go to touch you, or moving your arm away when they start to touch your hand or arm. And then the other technique people kind of seem to be promoting was to tell the person in a non-serious manner not to touch you. In one of the posts I saw, the writer said that saying, "Well, you've touched me, now you must die," usually worked for them to get the message across without being too asinine. If you're comfortable doing so, simply ask them not to touch you works the best of all. But sometimes that can be kind of hard if it's been going on for a while and you didn't immediately ask them not to touch you. Unfortunately, if they're making you uncomfortable and not getting the hint, you may have to address it directly and bust up the game, even if it's a little awkward. And if the situation is really starting to get out of control, you will probably want to, seek some kind of mediation through, a boss or HR or some sort of authority figure in the environment where this is taking place. Again, I do not actually have any real training in this situation. This is just kind of what I saw based off the research I did. If you really are having an issue with this situation, like I said, I would talk to some sort of authority figure, an HR representative, or somebody who has a bit of authority in whatever setting this is taking place, and look for their advice. Let's see. Next question here. What is it that makes someone want to make the step of touching somebody out of love? Whether you define out of love as in wanting to start a romantic relationship, as in wanting to take an existing romantic relationship to a stage of being in love, or as in wanting to touch somebody because you generally care about them, the answer is pretty much going to be the emotion behind it. Regardless of the level of intimacy we might share with someone, we usually touch in a loving manner when we feel strongly for them in a positive way and want to express it. Sometimes we feel hesitant to do so because we feel embarrassed or unsure how the person feels about us. And in this case, the touch will usually occur when the person decides the reward is worth the risk and finds the courage to make the touch anyway. And with that, I'm actually going to wrap up the first video here, and we'll go ahead and pause for a second before we start the next one. Thank you very much.